Lance, appreciate the time, man. Honored to have you on the show. I want to
Likewise.
start by, going back to your days at West Point, man, because you were a hooper.
Sure.
So,
I
talk about
was.
your
I
days being an
was.
athlete there. What did you learn? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
takeaways did you have from your days at West Point that kind of helped you propel into a successful investment career?
Gosh, great question. Um, yeah, not nearly as talented as you were and are, and like a few others. But yeah, had the honor to play basketball at West Point, at least for a few years prior to getting hurt. Patriot League, D1, dream come true to grew up my whole life wanting to play basketball. I mean, I wanted to be a 6'5" point guard. I think I mentioned to you and when we were at the All-Star game. Sadly, only made it to 5'11", still a point guard. But grew up watching great college teams, pro teams, and wanted to play at that level and got to play. It was a crazy experience. I mean, I didn't fully appreciate college sports until I played. And again, I played at West Point, small school. I mean, it's D1, but it's not playing at like a powerhouse. But just the amount of work that goes into those types of organizations, athletic departments to be like competitive at really any level, to me, it was just eye opening. I mean, you know, practices in the morning, in the evening, film at night. It was just eye opening to me. I think the thing too that was pretty interesting is and you heard this like throughout March Madness, you heard some people reference this. It's like chemistry for some of these like really successful teams. Like chemistry is so important. Um, like you heard people talking about. I mean, they're friends. They're hanging out together off the court. Um, they're spending a ton of time together, and I think that is super meaningful. And I imagine it's pretty similar, in other orgs, be it startups or other businesses that are really successful, like developing a culture and chemistry is like incredibly important for longevity of a business and success as a team. And I think you learn that a lot in sports, right? But you also learn like how, if you don't have that, you're not all that successful, even if you have great talent. And the one example that comes to mind for me is like the Portland Trailblazers a while back, where they had all this incredible talent, never really got the chemistry right, never really turned into like um, a super competitive team for like the long term. But yeah, I mean, I think that was one big thing, and then I think too in sports like that is relevant, or just sports remind me of in startups and investing is like there's so much work that like goes unseen that people don't know about, right? Like I know people talk about this, but I think like living it, and for people that have done it at even higher levels, like there's just so much work and grind and effort that goes into like something like that and being successful at those levels, either in sports or in business, that uh, I think is critical. And like you really don't reap the fruit of that effort until maybe down the road. So those are two things that yeah, I'm like reminded of when I think about my time in sports when I was more competitive at a younger age.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I'm glad you talked about the parallels between sports and the business world and, looking at your career now and investing. Um, obviously being with KB Partners, I believe you've been there since 2018. So you guys have, one of the top
Yeah.
firms in the sports tech space. Obviously, a testament to the team and the culture that you guys have been able to build. What was your initial draw to the firm when you started? And did you ever think about this idea of like investing in sports as a career back then?
Yeah, great question. I mean, to be honest, when I joined the founder and my colleague Steve, so joined Keith and Steve to launch this the first fund with a focus on sports back in 2018. Honestly, I was investment banking uh, after grad school, was working at JP Morgan there here in Chicago, and really had not thought a ton about venture capital, had not really thought about like working in the sports space until I met Keith, um, the founder, and learned about like some of the stuff that he had been investing in as an angel and what he wanted to build, um, like kind of under this fund structure. And at that time, there were definitely firms out there doing some really you know really neat stuff like like courtside and others, but there weren't nearly as many, or there wasn't nearly as much interest as you see today. And so like for me, the opportunity to kind of like um, help and work with companies from an investment perspective, um, as they think about growth, as they think about their vision, as well as do it in sectors that I'm just personally really excited about, like sports, was just so interesting. And I thought, we were a small team starting out as three people, like the ability to kind of help shape what that vision, could be was really intriguing as well, right? I had spent, time in the army. I had spent time at JP Morgan, massive orgs. The ability to go back to like a three-man team or three-person team and like kind of figure out what we wanted to build was super intriguing to me. A bit of a startup itself at that point, just like a different type of business, right? And an investment firm. So yeah, I really did not know a ton about venture capital at that time. Did not really think about the concept of like working in sports. But the combination of those two and being in Chicago and being a part of something that you could shape was just so intriguing to me.
Yeah. Can you kind of talk about the thesis behind KB Partners? Because obviously sports is a broad industry or sector, and there's a lot of different verticals within that. So, what is kind of the sweet spot for KB? Like, what kind of
Yeah.
opportunities that you guys are looking at?
Yeah. I mean, the headline is kind of the intersection of sports and technology and all that it touches, or sports and adjacent markets, right? Like our belief, if you think about um, like where sports extends, right? It touches health and wellness, it touches gaming, it touches media, it touches collectibles, it touches the live experience. Like our view is that like, you know, how can we leverage sports as a theme to get exposure to other adjacent markets like those, right? I think we also um, think sports is a great proving ground for other technologies and platforms and use cases that then can extend and grow like into more massive markets. Um, and so maybe like another way to say it is like sports as a wedge to these adjacent categories. So there's some investments in our portfolio that are obvious sports investments, right? But then there are others where you wouldn't really think of it as like a sports investment until you understood, the background or story. And oftentimes, or we made a few investments where the business isn't necessarily sports related, but maybe one of the initial go-to-market motions is targeting sports properties, or the founder and team come from a sports background and are leveraging that to tackle something adjacent to sports. And so um, that's the stuff that we find most interesting, is where sports can obviously be like a critical piece to the early business, but where there are natural logical adjacencies beyond that. We made a couple investments, one in travel, for example, one in like collectibles, where sports is an obvious market. But then if you think about entertainment broadly, or if you think about music, um, like those are other markets that both of those businesses could tap into.
Yeah. Obviously, there's so much growth around sports as an asset class, and we're seeing a lot of different firms getting into the space. But
Yes.
being kind of, I would say, like one of the legacy players with
Sure.
KB Partners, um, how do you guys think about, or at least for like a founder who's looking to pitch to you, because there's a lot of emerging startups in the space, and they want to get in front of like firms like KB Partners. What advice would you give to a founder on how to kind of cut through the noise and get
Yeah.
their startup seen by a firm, reputable firm such as yours?
Yeah, I mean it's such a good question. It's tough. It's such a tough question too. I think like firms uh you know, firms are always, I mean, I would like to think firms are always sort of iterating on stuff they're looking for based on their thesis, how the markets are changing, how the capital markets are evolving, things that are happening in that regard. I think, from like a very high level, like our our I guess initial focus areas aren't all that different from any other traditional venture firm. Like we're looking for opportunities that have the ability to grow into really, 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 really sizable successes. Um, Oftentimes that means like having a path, again, just high level, like having a path to 100 million in revenue. Um, Ideally more than that. It also depends on your margins, but where then if you're successful and can get acquired, it can be a meaningful part or a meaningful return to our fund. I think it also depends on the type of fund you're pitching as it relates to size and how they think about, deploying capital. But our second fund is 125 million. Um, we think about opportunities in a few different ways. So one of those is just, you know, could this investment, quote unquote, return our fund? Meaning if by the time the company exits and we own 10 or so percent of that business at exit, um, can it return 125 million to us? And that would mean it would have to be a unicorn or better, which is really tricky to think about that and try to forecast that out at the
Yeah.
seed stage, right? But I think there are other things like that that we think about and have to get conviction around at the same time, knowing that things are definitely going to change, like the business, the market, et cetera. Um, but I would say like having a pretty big vision for what someone is trying to build and what the business can become is something we think about. I think the other piece, like at the stages that we're investing in, it is heavily focused on the founding team. Like, do we believe that they have a unique advantage, some sort of core insight, like a structural piece about how they're operating that make them more likely than anybody else to be successful in what they're building? And like, do we want to work with them? Like most, we do try to be as helpful as possible, being like sector focused. We feel like we built a strong network with other people, other investors, other executives, people like you, for example, where if a business is looking for an introduction to one of those, we want to try to, be helpful there. And we want to try to be a thought partner for these founders as they think about it. So is this a group that we want to work with for likely, a decade if things go well? So it's heavily on the team. There's a big aspect of like the vision, having to believe that this can be meaningful. And then I think for us at the seed stage, we are generally looking for uh, what I would say like some sort of like customer love or user love or some sort of traction that allows us to have a conversation regarding how the founders are, building for that user, what sort of assumptions they're making, and how that informs the product. Again, it's not going to be enough traction for it to be like, oh, this is clearly a success. It's more about, okay, there's something here. Let's talk about and understand how you as the founder are trying to test other high, test what's going to win with that user and then how you scale that.
Mhm.
So I would say like those are the main things, right? The founding team, like some sort of like product momentum, traction, et cetera, and then like a pretty ambitious vision. Um, and everyone is gonna, especially at the seed stage, everyone is gonna view that differently. And
Yeah.
so what I would encourage founders to do is you just have to talk to enough people until you find the person that like gets it and like has a belief in you and the company you're trying to bring to life. And Sometimes it happens in the first meeting, other times it takes 6 months or a year, and
Mhm.
other times it just never happens. Like we've missed some things at the early stage that now we really like, but it's too far along for us. So uh, I think it is about like, you know, finding that investor that resonates with what you're trying to build, especially at these stages where it is just trying to build conviction with a combination of a few different elements in a business in order to make an investment.
Yeah, no, that's really solid insight. I want to dive deeper into the collectibles market because you're spending a lot of time there. You mentioned it a couple times. So,
Yeah.
can you talk about why you're so bullish on this space and where do you kind of see it going long term?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I got, like we were spending time in the category back kind of during the NFT bubble a little bit. And actually that exposed us to the collectibles category. And then a couple years ago, I met a founder here in Chicago who was in the space and just started poking around more. Went and got my shoebox of cards from when I was a kid and started testing out the various platforms. Probably spending way too much time and money on eBay, whatnot, Fanatics Live with PSA, grading my card. But doing all that, I think the stuff that we like a lot about certain markets is this concept or like components of passionate user bases, enthusiast markets, fandom communities. Like these things are all relevant in sports too. You see this very very significantly in sports, and I think it translates really well to kind of the collectible space. You have people as kids that are like opening packs and going to events and right? And then you have them doing that with their dads or like their
Yeah.
grandpa, like it spans generations, which I think is just so interesting. It's also like oftentimes like a group experience, right? Like trading cards are like kind of called that, or have this like you know nature of like I'm trading with you. I'm like looking at your cards and looking at mine. It's like I want that player and you want that, and so I think the like group nature of it is really neat too. It allows for organic growth and um, is a really neat entertainment experience. And so that's how I got intrigued by it. And as I dug deeper, just found that there was, you know, somewhat of a lack of capital going into the space in a, targeted way. And that the space was pretty fragmented as well. And so I think what Fanatics is doing is showcasing, what's happening there and driving a lot of interest. I think the pandemic, you know, got people again almost re-interested in their, childhood nostalgia of card collecting. Um, and so I think it's like has a lot of opportunity, has a lot of momentum. It touches on a lot of things that we think about um, as being interesting from a sports perspective and can extend into other adjacent markets, like I mentioned, right? Like you can go into entertainment, you can do stuff with other types of collectibles. So that's why I've gotten like super intrigued by it. I think it's super fun too. And there are a lot of, ways and places that it can go. Like it doesn't just have to be a card or an autographed jersey, but just something that you got from a game or you got from an event can be your own like collectible. And I think that's a neat thing too. Like it doesn't, there really is something for everyone, or there can be something for everyone. And so I think the opportunity for innovation in that in that space is just so large. So yeah, I'll stop there. But yeah,
No,
yeah, I'm a huge fan of the space.
no, I am too, man. It's funny because you mentioned eBay, and I was like, that's where I got my start in entrepreneurship. When I was in middle school, I would collect
Yeah,
basketball cards and um,
exactly.
jerseys, and I would flip them. I would flip them and sell them on
Yeah,
eBay. So that's how I started, man. So I got a special affinity for the collectible space as well. And during the pandemic, dug up some of my old cars and have them somewhere sitting in here. So it's
love
cool to
that.
see it kind of making a comeback. And then when you think about like technology and how you can layer technology onto this collectible space, when you think about digital and digital collectibles, what are your thoughts on how that is evolving within the space as well? Do you feel like digital collectibles will ultimately become more valuable given blockchain and kind of how that's kind of taking shape within the space?
Yeah, I mean, I do think like when you and I were, I guess, collecting, like there wasn't uh like the same sort of technology or even social engagement as there's now, right? Um like there really wasn't social media when I was collecting, and now like people can showcase stuff they're like collecting, doing, etc. I think that's really neat. I think the technologies, yeah, no, you think about crypto, Web3 rails, and what they enable in terms of, instant settlement and, um, right, like the ability to kind of leverage a digital asset like in a very seamless, frictionless way as a representation of your physical good. I think that is really interesting. I think we still have to figure out exactly what those use cases look like, but I do think just the technology advancement since we were collecting as kids, like, has come quite a long way that enables like a more sort of interesting experience, enables a new way to showcase the stuff that you're doing, enables a new way to leverage your like collection to do other things. And so I do think there will be this continuous evolution of what like, the, I guess, collectibles experience is. And I do think it will be a hybrid, between physical and digital. It'll be, though, some immersive aspects, like you're seeing this now where people are doing some interesting things where you could take a collectible and scan a QR code, and next thing you know, you're rewatching a highlight or something. So I think like just this, like the way that I would talk about collecting, it's like another form of fandom, of course. And I think just like the the experiences and the entertainment that can come from that now with the technology that we have is just really neat. And I also think like the the ability to reduce friction on how you acquire stuff, how you engage with others, because of the technology advancements and because of things like, you know, uh, blockchain and, um, I just think that that's going to open up like whole new opportunities that really didn't exist when you and I were in the hobby like that way. I mean, I also think like there's probably a lot of things we're going to see though that are trying to do some of this and don't get it right. And, you know, you have a graveyard of like companies or startups that maybe tried to do too much that just never really captured the attention. So I think it will be like a little bit of a an up and down, um, trajectory, trying to figure out what users really want and what really drives value. But I think there is like so much opportunity with that for sure.
I agree. I agree. Getting back to KB Partners for a second. Now, looking at your portfolio companies, obviously you work closely with Status Pro, and shout out to Troy and Hawk, and
Yeah.
they're killing it, man. So, can you kind of talk about some of the companies that you're most excited about that you think are like underrated or under the radar
Yeah.
within the KB portfolio?
Yeah. I mean, I'll selfishly talk about some of the ones that I work most closely with. Try to do it pretty quickly. I mean, I think Status Pro, yeah, just so interesting what they've built, right? Like coming from their athlete experience and trying to bring that into like an immersive context with AR and VR. You're seeing some of this in a game experience. You're seeing some of it in training. Now you're seeing some of it in media. I think Troy and Hawk are just incredible. Like, again, I think a lot of the stuff that they learned as athletes comes through with their, you know, drive to never quit, drive to figure things out. It's just been impressive watching them navigate what they have to, navigating big leagues and big companies that they partner with and so on. So really neat there. I think the realist with DJ Ski, so it's on the collectible side, doing authentication and pairing it with like a storytelling marketplace. They did something really neat this year with the Eagles, so Super Bowl champs. Again, taking a new vision for how you authenticate and market collectibles, and use those as a piece of fandom is neat. I think another company of ours, Book Seats, which
Mhm.
is doing a really neat thing in the travel space. So they're aggregating onto one platform event tickets, flight tickets, and lodging. And so you can go to one place, one stop shop, and book everything that you need to go attend a game, for example, in another city. They've partnered with groups like the Green Bay Packers to launch official Packers travel. You go there, you book everything you need, and you go to the game, which is really neat because now it's a way for Packers to have another touch point with their fans, and offer them something that they can't get elsewhere. So I think that's quite interesting. And then the last one I'll mention is a company called Stadium Live, um, which is kind of in the consumer social space, leveraging sort of like a digital community along with some free to play games, and like some gaming uh, mechanics to tie it all together around sports fandom. And again, like they've had their fair share of, waves of things that they've, tested over time. And I think recently I found something really interesting, and it's been incredible to watch them too, just kind of navigate um, their points of view on what's interesting to users and how to test that and how to iterate. So those are the four that, at least right now, are top of mind and super interesting.
No, I appreciate that, man. And as we wind down here, I got like one or two more questions for you.
Yeah.
Um, the first being, when you look at the way technology is intersecting within sports, are there any specific trends or levels of innovation that you're most excited about when you kind of forecast the next 5 to 10 years, outside of what we talked about around collectibles?
Yeah. I mean, this is so, I think the two things, I mean, in general, that are going to shape quite a bit of the next decade or two, and this isn't anything new or unique, but I think AI, obviously, and crypto, uh, are going to be, or, blockchain in general, I think are going to be pretty meaningful. And I think, whatever sports orgs or companies or startups can leverage those to enhance, again, the user experience, reduce friction, and then reach and onboard like latent demand or users that they never knew existed, I think is really interesting. I think oftentimes too, like we get pretty excited about just spending time with other founders in the space and letting them lead us to where they think the future is going. Like, and that's kind of how we got into collectibles. I mean, that's how we got into AR VR with sports with Troy and Hawk, right? We didn't necessarily have a strong thesis on one of those things, but we met someone that was super captivating and then dove in with them as they were explaining how they think about the world. And so that's generally like a little bit more of our strategy is, we have some, I guess, topics that we think are intriguing, but then what we believe or like to do is go spend time with other people in those spaces and almost let them showcase what they think about the future as the founder that's living in it day to day. More so than us and there are some firms that do very, very deep dive thematic things on where they think the world is going. I think while we have some, I guess, perspectives on, areas we find interesting and so on, I think because we're investing at the seed stage, like we tend to lean into more what founders, what teams do we want to work with, and do we align with their vision? And that's where we spend a lot of our time.
For sure. Lance, man, this has been dope. I appreciate it. Lastly, let everybody know where
Likewise.
they can connect with you, and learn more about KB Partners.
Yeah, best is just email lance@kbpartners.com. Um, and then, yeah, website, LinkedIn, but best is always email. And if you want to give me a follow on Twitter, you'll be like my third follower. So you can do that too.
We got to get my man's followers up.
Right, 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 right.
Appreciate the time, man.
Thank you as always, Malcolm. It's great to connect and chat. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.